if you had a reset button, but you can't use it for everything. Like you can't do a do-over like all the time. Like, I don't like my hair today. Boom, reset. Oh, I forgot to brush my teeth. Boom, reset. Or, oh, we forgot a kid at home on our way to church. Boom, reset. You can't reset all the time, but just a few times you could reset major things. Would you want it, and would you use it? The big conversation right now is what is going to be the new normal? What's going to be our new normals, right? A lot of people talking about that. What's going to be the new normals? For some people, the new normal is that we're going to be on lockdown in certain states. Summer is canceled, fall school canceled, college canceled. Everything's online now. Everything's, forget about traveling. It's crazy the times that we're living in and the difficulty. And everything's up in the air for everybody on one level or another. And whether you're in an area like we are, where we're relatively, the effect of COVID-19 has been minimal compared to other places in the country, or whether you're in a place where it's been really bad, people are starting to get. And so here's the question: is what is the new normal going to be? And there's some things we don't have control over. I don't have control over what colleges and universities are going to do as far as school in the fall. We don't have control over that. We don't have control over whether the bathrooms will be open or the bathrooms will be closed when you're on a road trip. I can't control that. I assume you can't control that. We might, we could tweet about it or go off on social media about it maybe, but we really can't change those things. We don't have power to do that. But in your own life, you do have power to decide what are going to be the new normals in your own life. And so my encouragement this morning is I'd love to encourage you to be proactive in that effort, to figure out what are the new normals, what do they need to be in your own life? What are the new normals for your own life? And specifically, I want to focus on families this morning, and that's for several reasons. What is the new normal going to be for your family? We've already talked about this a little bit over the last several months. Well, I got a piece of mail just yesterday, as a matter of fact. I already was going to talk about this, and this just proved the point that much more. And it's from the Tennessee Connections Academy. Grow toward a bright future with the online learning experts. Grow towards a bright future with the online learning experts. Tuition-free online public school for grades K to 12. Enroll now for fall 2020. Okay? This just came in the mail. Tennessee Connections Academy. Check out this article that just was posted. It was a research piece that was done by Real Clear Opinion Research. Here's what they said. Real Clear Opinion Research poll of 2,122 registered voters that a strong majority surveyed support school choices, and 40% are more likely to pursue homeschooling opportunities after COVID-19 restrictions end. 40% of people that were doing school, like probably public schooling or government schooling, 40% are going, yeah, maybe we will homeschool now. Maybe we'll just homeschool. We got to come up with a plan. Let's figure this out. Slightly more than 40% polled said that they were more likely to homeschool in virtual school after the lockdown. Now, part of that's because they were forced to do it, and they were told that you can't school your kids on your own. You can't do this. It's impossible. Everything will fall down. Your house will burn down. It won't work. And they did it, and they've, might not be perfect, but they survived. And so they're going, yeah, we can do this. Part of it might be fear. They don't want their kids to get sick. They don't want them to be, shot. They don't want them to be poisoned by food. I don't know, whatever. And so they're saying, maybe we should just bring our kids home. Maybe that would be better. But before the coronavirus, roughly 4% of K through 12 students were in home education settings. Now 40% are saying, yeah, I think we might do that. We'll check it out. Every single family with kids in school has been incredibly disrupted by the lockdown, says John Schilling, president of American Federation of Children. And in a prepared statement, he said this: with 55 million students no longer in their normal education settings, families are clearly considering new options, and many are seeing the benefits of homeschooling and virtual schooling. Now, I know if you're thinking through this, not just for your own family, but just thinking about this politically, or how does this affect our society as a whole? Every single family with kids in school has been incredibly disrupted by lockdown, says John Schilling. With 55 million students no longer in normal education, families are clearly options. So what about you? And this isn't about just school. I just want you to think through some things in your family. Who's in charge of your family decisions and in your own individual life? Let's just take a moment and let's think about our kids and family. I mentioned this last week briefly, but when you look at a year, a snapshot of a year in your kids' lives, you got 3,000 potential hours of influence as things have been when your kids are. This doesn't take into account whether you're public school or homeschool. It's kind of blended a little bit, whether your kids are in Christian school, regardless of the school situation. 3,000 hours in a given year to influence your child's life. Church, on a good day, I mean, we have maybe 40 hours in a year. I said a good day. That's confusing. In a year, we might have 40 shots at encouraging families, and they're important. So these are bigger gumballs because these are important, significant days. We come together to gather, and our kids are encouraged in Jesus, and they hear mom and dad worshiping, which, by the way, kids being in here, we're so excited that you guys are in here and that you could see mom and dad worshiping and singing and listening to God's word taught to them. And so we're hoping that on the way home you can talk and you can say, you know, mom and dad, what did you get out of this message? So kids, ask your parents on the way home, what did you learn? Okay? And they might say, nothing, we were chasing you the whole time. Hopefully they won't say that. But hey, it might be a little sloppy having all of our kids in here. No problem. We're just glad that we're blessed that we have children here across life. So I would rather have sloppy with kids than, this proverb, right? Where the stall is clean, there is no oxen, right? Okay, so oxen are good, they're helpful, they're productive, but they're messy. Same thing with kids. I don't know about productive, but the messy part. So here's the challenge in this. The average 8 to 18-year-old, 3,000 hours, okay, the average 8 to 18-year-old spends 7 hours on media every day. A conservative estimate of that, you're looking at 2,562 hours in a year, which accounts to basically, so this is the state of things. This is the normal. And we're looking for a new normal. We're looking for a reset, all right? So the normal, where we are, is this is all you got left, parents. This is all you have. You have 438 hours in a year to influence your kids. That's it. Why is that? Because we have given over to everybody else all this other opportunity and time. And so this whole huge 3,000 hours now is dwindled down to just under 500 hours, 400 and something, that we have left to impact our kids. So, well, why does that matter? Is it really that important? Yeah, I've got another jar. These are not gumballs, but this is our marbles jar. Now, here's what we learned from this one. 936 weeks in your child's life until the age of 18. You have 936. When your kid is born and they come into this world, the clock starts ticking and the weeks start rolling by. You get 52 in a year. You get 18 years of them, and by their 18th year, you're down to 936 years have just gone by. Now, the first time I shared this, which was several years ago, I guess it was 5 years ago, first time I shared this, I remember just thinking, page 12 and a half, we've got 286 weeks yet left. I mean, that's not a lot, but that's a lot, 286. And Caroline, our youngest, 824 weeks left. 824. In fact, I took some out of Caroline's jar and I put them in Pate's jar because I'm like, we need more time with Pate. We need less time with Caroline, and we didn't. No, I'm kidding. She's in the room, so I can't talk about her as much now. So I'm just kidding, Caroline. We took all the boys' marbles and put them in the girls' jars so we get more time. Now, so where are we at this point? Well, Pate's now 17. He turns 18 in August, and so we've got 11 weeks left until his 18th birthday. Just 11 weeks. 11 weeks. That's 4, 5, big one in, just to add a little bit more to it. That's all we got left. That's all we got left before he's 18. Now, fortunately, we got one more year with him in our house, at least. Fortunately, we got a little more time on the clock. But ultimately, man, time flies. Caroline she went from 824 weeks left to now she's 7. We have 552 weeks left with her. So time is flying by so fast, and we have to think about how are we investing in our kids and how are we spending these weeks we have. And so we need to hit a reset. We need to rethink what are we doing, and whether you have kids in your home or not, you still need to rethinking through how am I going to orchestrate my life and moving forward. How can I be the most strategic with the limited time we have? Think about this question moving forward in your own life. Think about this question. What are your concerns for today? What are the things you're worried about? What are the things you're consumed with? What are the things you've been busy with? What are the things that are causing you concern? 100 years from now, just think about your age right now. Think about 100 years from now. The only thing that's going to matter is your relationship to God. 100 years from now, the only thing that is really going to matter is your relationship with God. To go a step further, 100 years from now, the only thing that's going to matter about your kids is not whether how you navigated the quarantine and how you did this and how you did that and what do we do this summer because we were on lockdown and what do we do. That's not going to matter. What was their GPA? What were their grades? They get their papers done. Did we get this done? Did we get that done? They go to Ivy League school. They go to this thing. They go to that. None of that stuff. What's going to matter the most about your kids 100 years from now? Do they know Jesus or not? How is their relationship with God? That's the only thing that is going to matter. And so here's the key. There's no force that's as helpful in focusing and clarifying as the reality of the fact that we have limited time. There's no force more impactful, more influential on our desire to be focused and have clarity in how we live and conduct our lives than the reality that we have limited time. We have limited time left on the clock. How can we best utilize the time that we have as families, as individuals? And so looking at families, a couple more thoughts I want to give you just briefly. A World Magazine article said this: young adults who said their fathers explained biblical principles to them on a daily or weekly basis growing up were significantly more likely to say they lived by typical Christian behavior as adults. Like, in other words, things like praying, volunteering with their time, giving, reading their Bible, attending church frequently, avoiding pornography, use of marijuana, abortion, cohabitation before marriage. Those things were significantly less when they grew up in a home where dad, mom and dad, but certainly dad was involved on a daily and weekly basis, not just praying before meals, not just taking them to church, but was having regular, significant conversations about spiritual things, about biblical principles. If you had to ask for a mixture of things that overall are correlated in strong Christian beliefs with strong Christian beliefs and strong Christian orthopraxy. So orthodoxy, right beliefs, orthopraxy, right life and living and practice. So not just believing right, but acting right. Like there's an integration between what you say you believe and how you act and how you live your life. Both of those two things are connected, all right? So if you're to figure that out, if you're to say, well, what are the factors that come together that make those things, improve those things in our lives? What does that look like, okay? You'd be looking at making sure mom and dad developed a relationship with their kids, and specifically their teens, that they're regular participants in a local church, and they practice home-based, parent-led discipleship, said Brian Ray, researcher behind the World Magazine survey, president of the National Education Research Institute, Salem, Oregon. He went on to say, I don't want to pretend it's a formula. I'm just saying, statistically, there's a pattern. There's a pattern. But when you have home-based, parent-led discipleship, you're involved in a local church, so you're not neglecting the 40, it should be 52, but people sick, people get quarantined and locked out of church, things happen, you're traveling, okay? So you're going to miss some weeks, that's fine. But unless providentially hindered, you're here to be fed, to be encouraged, to be spurred on, great. That's awesome. But outside of this, what are you doing at home? Parents, you are the primary spiritual influencers of your children. You're the ones who have to be, pouring in their life. If you don't have kids yet, you're young, you're not married, you're single, well, what is the foundation you're laying for your future? What's the foundation you're laying for your future? How much are you into the Word of God? What are the patterns in your own life? How are you laying down? If you're an empty nester, your kids are out, how are you assisting, helping, encouraging, imploring, forcing your kids to be pouring into your grandkids, right? I mean, that conversation might begin with an apology that, man, here's what I wish I would have done if I'd known better, but I didn't know better. And so let me encourage you. How can I come beside you and help you? How can I help you pour into our grandkids that our generations down the line will know and live for Jesus? So all of this together, you got three options. Number one, you can do nothing new. Don't change. Don't do anything new. Don't use the reset button, okay? You can just keep doing what you're doing and just do, look, that's not how I was raised. I'm gonna raise my kids the way I was raised. Josh McDowell said, if you raise your children the way you were raised, you're gonna lose them. Like, the world's changed, the game's changed, everything's changed. It's just not the same environment that you grew up in. And so you might want to rethink some things, but you don't have to. You don't have to. You can just keep doing what you're doing, and that's fine. Do nothing new. Same thing for every individual in this room, in your own relationship with the Lord. You can do nothing. You just keep going with where you're at. Or number two, you can choose an idealistic, unrealistic, unattainable goal. You can say, you know what? we're going to memorize the Bible by the end of the quarantine, okay? We're going to make sure that we're going to, and you can come up with a bunch of different things. Then in the fall, we're going to teach our kids biblical Hebrew, and then in the spring, we're going to learn biblical Greek, and then we're going to memorize the Bible in the original languages. And then for fun, we're going to learn the Latin Vulgate, and then we're going to, unrealistic expectations. Unrealistic. Let's walk before we run. But choose idealistic, unrealistic, attainable goals. That's an option. It's not going to work, but you can try. Or number three, this is my encouragement to you. We can choose to grow, learn, and begin to make the small changes that will result in a reset for your family. Let's just start to make some small little changes. One of our Cross Life families said, you know what, for the next month, we're going to fast from, and I'm thinking that's awesome, because if you're fasting, then you don't have to go to the grocery store, you won't get the coronavirus, and so you just stay home. And then they said, but I'm thinking, I don't know how long my kids would last not eating. It probably wouldn't work, but I'd probably get in trouble. So, but they said, we're going to fast from media for 30 days, a couple months, I forget. And I thought, man, that's wonderful. What are they doing? They're saying, you know what, we're going to reset. We're just going to take a moment. We're going to detox. We're going to say, we can live with that. We won't die. Food, if we don't eat for 3 months, we'll die. But media, we won't die if we don't have media. Other than streaming the service when you have to stay home. That's all right. Or the Cross Life app. You're allowed to do that. But that thinking through those things, what are we going to do? How are we going to take some baby steps? So I'm going to give you some background here. You say, well, how do we learn from this? And what does the Bible have to say to us about pandemics and social media and media influences and the times we're living in, and how can we deal with that? And is there anything in the Bible that's really applicable? Well, get this. Here's what's going on. So kids, I want you to tune in because I want to tell you a story, and I want you guys to listen. So all the kids, look up here. I want eyeballs on me. Every kid. All right. So there once was a nation of people that lived hundreds of years. They were living hundreds of years under oppression. They were slaves. They were being treated really badly. Many of them were being hurt, even killed. It was a really tough place that they lived at. They were having to make bricks and having to build buildings and temples and pyramids and things like that. And it was the Hebrew people. They're living in a place called, anybody know, kids? Egypt. Thank you. Yes, they're living in Egypt under slavery, forced oppression. It was a horrible situation. And they were praying that God would lead them out. And so God provided a person that was going to be instrumental to lead them to freedom. And so this guy was instrumental in rebuilding their sense of identity. God used him to do that as the people of God who had faith in God, who trusted God, and he led them out of Egypt, conquered the Egyptian army, led them through the Red Sea, out into the wilderness, gave them his laws and his rules in ways that they can relate to him, gave them a temple so that when they make mistakes, they have a way of being right with God. So they get punished in a sense, in a small way, so they don't get punished in a horrible way after they die and have to spend eternity separated from God. So there was a place where they could go, where they could make sacrifices to be right with God when they messed up. So one day, after he led them out, they hadn't gotten to this new land he was going to give them. God had promised, I'm going to give you a new land that will be safe, and it's going to be awesome. There's going to be gardens, and there's going to be vineyards, and there's going to be big cows and lots of milk. There's going to be tons of honey, and there's going to be giant grapes, and it's going to be a land flowing with milk and honey. It's going to be awesome. A bountiful land. It's like saying that you could go to Kroger or Sam's or wherever, and there's going to be plenty of toilet paper, and there's going to be plenty of meat, plenty of milk, plenty of bread, all the things that are absent from the shelves, right, at times. And so there's going to be all you need. But one day, the word began to spread among the community, among the tribes, and they're camping out in the wilderness, and the word starts to spread, and people are hearing what's going to happen, and people start saying, you know what, our leader isn't going to lead us into this promised land. The rumor was he was going to pass the leadership to somebody else, and he was probably going to die soon. And so he's led them faithfully to this point, led them out of captivity, out of bondage, all the way to the land. He's given them God's laws, and now they're about to go into the land Moses is not going with them. And so they begin to get a little concerned about that. And so as they gather to hear him, and he gives them this farewell speech that we know basically is the book of Deuteronomy, it contains it, he began to remind the people of some things. He began to remind them of the law. He reminded them how God had saved them, how God had chosen them, how God had taken them like a parent would take a child, it says in Psalms. God took Israel's hand and walked them safely out of danger and captivity into freedom. And he has provided for them for 40 years. He gave them food. He gave them water. They had everything they needed to thrive as they traveled through desolate deserts. He saved them. He delivered them. He provided for them. He protected them from dangerous other armies that would try to conquer them. And so all of this, as he reminds them of the law and he reminds them of what he's done, it sounds familiar to them, but then he gives them one new nugget. He starts to throw some new things on there that I hadn't heard before, and that's what I want to share with you this morning. And so he says a few new things. Not only have I led you out and given you freedom, and I've provided for you, and I've taken care of you, and I've showed you how we can relate and have a good relationship. Here's my rules. Don't kill anybody. Don't steal. Obey your mom and dad. Do what you're supposed to do. Here's the things you're supposed to remember. Love the Lord your God. Don't have idols. Don't use God's name in all these things. But I'm gonna tell you a couple more things. So I want to summarize all of that, and I want you to remember this. And this is what Deuteronomy 8 or 6 tells us. And this every Jewish child memorized this. It was some of the first words they would have used and the first words they would have learned from God's word. And he says this, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your might. And these words that I commanded you today shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up." Verse 8, "You shall bind them as a sign on your hand," that little box they put on their hand and tie it on with his leather straps, "and as a frontlets between your eyes." They put a little box with the law in there and the reminder of these words on their forehead. "You shall write them on your doorposts of your house and on your gates. And when the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to give you, with great and good cities that you did not build, and houses full of good things that you did not fill, and cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant. And when you eat and are full, then take care lest you forget that the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, is the Lord your God. You shall fear him. You shall serve him, and by his name you shall live your life. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are around you. For the Lord your God is in your midst, and he is a jealous God, lest the anger of the Lord your God be kindled against you, and he destroy you from off the face of the earth." In this transition from slavery and wandering and settling in this land with milk and honey and this fruitfulness, it's going to be a season of rest, and that's going to be good. But then they're going to get lazy, and there's going to be the tendency for them to gravitate towards not really appreciating all that they've been given. It's going to be dangerous. They got to be extremely careful and diligent to not become distracted by the prosperity, the fruitfulness, and the riches of their new life. And they would forget to accurately and diligently teach generation after generation after generation about God and what he's done and how they can know him. And so what is the point? What are the points we want to take away from this? Well, there's a few things in this. Verse 4, first of all, live with the end in sight. Live with the end in sight. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind. There's going to be all kinds of different things that you can choose to take the resources God has entrusted you with, and you could invest them, spend them, waste them, if you will, on those things. You have the freedom to do that, and you're gonna have to be really careful not to do that. So be careful. Remember that the Lord, God's divine name, Yahweh specifically, is our God. We have a God, and he's the real God, and there's only one of these gods. There's only one real God. Okay, and so that's our God. So live with the end in sight, because one day the wooden gods, the false saviors, all the things we construct, we make, we worship, we give our lives to, those things are all going to be gone. And they're not going to matter. And the one true God will still be there. And you're going to be accountable to him. And you're going to have to give account to him for the way you lived your life, for what you did. Did you live your life selfishly and living after your own passions and chasing after your own? Did you live your own way? Or did you live your life for Jesus? And more importantly, have you acknowledged your sinfulness and your need for God's help, repented of that, and put your trust in the one true God, specifically his son, Jesus? We need to live with the end in sight. Again, 100 years from now, the only thing that's going to matter is your relationship with God and your children's relationship with God. That's the only thing that's going to matter ultimately in your family, right? That's all. That's it. So live with the end in sight. It goes on to say, verse 13, it's the Lord your God you shall fear. And fear him alone, you serve him alone, and by his name you're to live your life. You're to swear and you're to live your life. Verse 15, for the Lord your God is in your midst, and he is a jealous God, lest the anger of the Lord your God be kindled against you, and he destroy you from off the face of the earth. So Moses was less concerned with them becoming atheists. That wasn't Moses' concern. He wasn't, look, you guys need to continue believing in God. Because there's going to be a tendency that people are going to get educated, you're going to get really smart, and you're going to realize you're going to think there's no God, and so you got to be careful about that. I don't want you. That wasn't his concern. Atheism isn't growing. Atheism, it's not growing. People are more spiritual today than they ever have been, despite incredible gains among atheists as far as their volume in society and influence over society. The numbers have stayed the same. It's not changing. And Moses, even back then, he wasn't concerned with atheism. He was more concerned with them becoming idolaters, distracted by wealth, distracted by prosperity, distracted by their security, and chasing after their false gods. And so all of that, does that sound familiar? I mean, have you ever known a people that was like so distracted by all of the abundance of the opportunities and the privileges and the things that they have, that were going about life, doing their thing and chasing after their stuff and doing all their stuff, and then suddenly everything was ripped away from them and a pandemic swept the land and everybody was stuck in their houses and couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do anything, couldn't pay their bills, and now they're just having to rethink everything and go, you know what, should we reset? I mean, that's what God's done to us. He's forced us in a situation where we can be like the children of Israel and we can recalculate all of the stuff of our lives and go, you know what, maybe we should rethink new normals here. He was concerned that they would be in that position. He wasn't worried about them not worshiping a God. He was worried about them worshiping a false God. So live with the end in sight. What is the win for your kids? Is it good grades, lots of activities, keeping them busy? Is it having the right friends? Is it the right school? Is it sports? Is it grades? Is it college? Is it a job? Is it a spouse? Those are good goals. Those are fine, but they're not what matters most. I mean, it's possible that you can gain all those things. You can get all those things. It's possible that you can gain the world and you can still lose your soul. It's all that matters. It's all that ultimately matters. Live with the end in sight. Recognize what's the end game here. What are we shooting for? Second thing, fight for the heart. Fight for the heart in your own life, in your kids' lives, in the lives of your friends, your family, everybody around you. Fight for the heart. What do I mean by that? Well, love the Lord your God. Love the Lord. Love the Lord. With what? With all your heart. With all your heart. With all your mind. He says specifically in Deuteronomy, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. In the New Testament, they add mind in there. All your heart, soul, mind. That's all of who you are. Every aspect of who you are. Your thinking, your passions, your mind, your will, your emotions. Take all of those things, your body, physically, take all of that and yield it to God and love God with all of that. Love God with all of that. The one thing that separates a living, vibrant faith from dead ritualism and cultural religiosity is love. Now, I hope you're not here because you felt like, I need to be here. It's the right thing to do, and I ought to be here, and God's going to be pleased with me because I was here, and now I was here, and so I came and worshiped this morning, or I tuned in, and I was on there, and I listened to the live stream, and I was on for a little while, and so God's going to be happy with me. I've done my thing. No. I hope we're here, or we're moving towards the point where we're here because we love God. I mean, I want to be encouraged by God. I want to be encouraged by God's people. I want to be encouraged by the songs and the Psalms and the proclamation of God's word through song. And I want to be encouraged by praying with the body of Christ. I want to be encouraged by being around people and being 6 feet from them. I want to be encouraged by seeing people pop online and go, hey, sorry we're not there, or we wish we could be there, but we love you guys and we're watching and we're with you, we're praying, whatever. That we can be connected to one another because we love God and we love his people. Man, that's we want to fight for the heart. We want to be motivated by the right things. Jesus would take the same words 1,500 years ago, and he would repeat them when asked, what is the greatest commandment? What's the one, if you could just summarize all the commandments into one commandment, what would it be? And he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength. He didn't give him a list of rules. The greatest commandment, let's see. As parents, here's what we think, okay? If I was with Jesus and they asked him, what's the greatest commandment? I would be like, he'd say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength. And I'd be like, could you say something about obeying your mom and dad? Could you just throw that one in there? God, Jesus, would you mind doing that? Love your neighbors yourself. Great. But what about your kids? What about them? They need to obey mom and dad. Like, can you just re-up that one? Can you do that one again? Right? But man, he summarizes them all. The most important thing is love. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul. Everything else flows out of that. Many parents are trying to pass down rules and values to their children, disconnected from a vibrant, living, loving relationship with Jesus. Rules, values, truths, apart from the love, will lead to dead religion. Many parents try to win head arguments with their kids, and they're not really thinking about the gospel change. You're going to obey me, and they just want kids that obey and do the right thing. And that's good. We want kids that obey, but more importantly, we want kids that obey because of a heart motivation they can't apart from God. They know they need Jesus' help to obey, and they're motivated to live for Jesus and live for his glory and to look to Jesus to help them. That's what we want. The goal of behavior is not that we would modify it, but that their hearts would be changed. Our kids' greatest need is not structure. It's not rules. It's not this school, that school for that matter. It's a loving relationship with Jesus that produces heart change and rules. Rules will not overcome habitual sin. Let me say it again, teenagers and adults. Rules will never overcome your habitual sins, your reoccurring sins. Won't do that. Love for something greater alone will overcome those things. Many kids rebel against their parents' faith because their faith was divided from love. And love divided is not true love. Parents, the battle for the heart is won through relationships, authenticity, being authentic, not being perfect, but being authentic. So what do you do in moderation? Whatever you do in moderation, your kids are going to do in excess. So if you a little bit of the world, a little bit of Jesus, your kids are going to have a lot of the world and probably less of Jesus, right? What you do in moderation, your kids are going to do in excess. So what do? We need to fight for the heart, but thirdly, we need to make it personal. He says in verse 6, these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. Like they need to be with you all the time. Like you really need to, what's on your heart? What's on your heart? What's going on? What's on your heart? What are you thinking about? What are you chewing on? What are you meditating on? What are you considering? These words need to be on your heart. You need to be thinking about them. You need to be chewing on them. You cannot effectively teach what you do not live and possess, parents. You can't do that. I can't talk to coworkers at work. I can't talk to neighbors. I can't talk to friends about something that I don't possess myself. You can't lead somebody somewhere you've not been. So you have to make it personal. They need to be on your heart. This does not mean that you're 100% perfect, that your kids are 100% perfect, but we're all in process, and we're taking steps. We're moving in the right direction. Remember, the purpose of the law is to point us to our need for Jesus. So the most important thing you can give your kids or anybody else watching your life is an accurate view of what it looks like not to be perfect, not to appear perfect, not to pretend to be perfect, but an accurate view of what it looks like to authentically be changed and transformed by Jesus. We call it discipleship, to be a disciple who's following Jesus, being changed and transformed by Jesus, and on mission with Jesus. Not a person who claims to be a follower of Jesus and is perfect, and they don't let anybody ever see the mistakes, because they're going to see a mistake. They're going to see you mess up at some point, and then they're going to be like, oh, they're just a hypocrite like everybody else. Now, be authentic, be real. Make it personal. It needs to be in your heart. And then lastly, reset your rhythms. Teach these things diligently to your children, verse 7. Talk about them when you sit down. and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. So when you sit, when you're walking through the day, when you lie down, when you rise up, that's the 4 things he puts there. So if you just kind of summarize these in 3 points. Drive time, your living time, your drive time. Informal dialogue. Friend, you're interpreting life. You're talking about things. You're in community with your children and others, but children specifically. And then when you lie down, bedtime. Man, this is a time for intimate conversations. This is a time for you shift from the friend role to counselor role. You're building intimacy and trust as they kind of pour their hearts out about the day. And then the third step is when you wake up in the morning time, encouraging words. Be the coach. Be an encourager. You're instilling purpose and direction. Hey, today we're going to pray that God is going to help us walk with him no matter what happens. We're going to be encouraged that we want to think about what God wants to do. We want to be sensitive to how he wants to lead us. Who can we love? Who can we encourage this week? Who can we be a blessing to or today? So looking at those 3 times, drive time, bedtime, morning time, informal dialogue, intimate conversation, encouraging words. It's a simple pattern. So regarding school, I don't want to make a huge hard sell on you what you need to do with your kids. I just want you to know this. With no shred of interest, concern for Jesus, the Bible, a biblical worldview that says God made everything, and every single person is born with dignity, purpose, worth, value. Everybody matters, regardless of their decisions, regardless of their dysfunctions, regardless of their deformities, regardless of whether they're born or not. Once they're been conceived and are developing in their mother's womb until the point where God chooses to bring them home, they matter. They matter. Regardless of what the world says, a biblical worldview. The world is saying, look, we will give you tools to educate your kids. You need to bring them to us. We're the professionals. We'll take care of them. And now they're not the professionals. They can't take care of them because they'll get sick. And so certain people are saying they can't come here and we can't do this. We're going to have to figure out another way. So now they're saying, okay, we've got a plan. We're going to make this easy for you. We're going to have virtual classroom, virtual this, virtual that. And so we'll give you a sign up, be free. You just kind of bring them. What's the problem? They want the money. They want the government money. One of the things that's going on is more than 50%, like 60, 70%, even more Democrats than Republicans are saying, we want free school choice. We want to have our own money to choose what we do. Maybe we're going to buy a better computer and enroll in a course where it'll teach a little bit about Jesus also in the Bible and not just secular reasoning and humanism. We want to have control over our children's education. I'm just saying, look, don't let anybody else make the decision for you parents. Would you just hit the reset button and think about how can I disciple my own kids? How can I maximize that? You can do that however you want. I was going to read through some points of an article. I'm just going to post it from James Emery White. So be looking for that this afternoon. James Emery White, who's a pastor of a church, Mecklenburg Community Church in Charlotte. Very innovative, very cutting-edge church, an awesome, great church. And he says this. I'll read you the first quote, and then he gives 7 points. I won't tell you the 7 points. But 7 reasons why I homeschool. It's what he's choosing. He says, I believe to my core of being that every parent who can, and not all can. Of course, this was written before quarantine and before the world changed. Every parent who can, and not every parent can, should homeschool the children. There. I've said it. I stand by it. Here's 7 reasons why. He goes on to say at other places, if you can't do that, put them in a Christian school, put them in a Christian environment if you can do that. If you can't do that, and I have to go into a government school, to a public school, whatever, you just need to be putting that much more time and energy to filtering everything they're hearing and they're learning. But I'm asking you to prayerfully consider, how do we need to reset our lives as individuals, as families, to make the most of the time? Because we only have 936 weeks when the clock starts ticking when the kids come into our lives. We only have 3,000 hours in a given year to be able to invest, and that's even reduced because of this whole social media thing. And so we've got to rethink all of that stuff in our own lives with the time that we have, because 100 years from now, nothing's going to matter except for your relationship with God and the relationship of your friends and family members with God, and most importantly, the relationship of your children with God.